Here we go. Hi, everyone. This is the Texas District Charter Alliance webinar series, Negotiations and Contracts Part 2. In this webinar, it's intended to provide viewers with an overview on topics specifically on the partnerships contracts between negotiations between districts and partners. Carrie Davis from Empower Schools is going to be heading this webinar, and she has invited some guests that will also go into this. If you were unable to make it, or if one of your colleagues was interested in joining today and are unable to make it, these webinars will be posted on our website and available for everyone to see before the end of this week. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Carrie and let her have the screen share. So bear with us as I go ahead and do this. Thanks, guys. You ready, Carrie?
All right, gotta go into the Zoom. Okay, so hopefully everyone is able to see my screen right now. Any thumbs up, confirmation before I keep going? All right, thanks. So while people are just trickling in, if y'all could put in your name, introduction, or this is an introduction, your name and your organization and your role into the chat, that would be great. Welcome, welcome. All right, so we will go ahead and kick it off, and if anyone comes in as we're going, luckily this is recorded, and they can go ahead and drop their information in the chat as well. So welcome to part 2 of Negotiations and Contracts, DCA's mini webinar series. If y'all weren't able to catch part 1, you will be able to find it online on DCA's website. So go ahead and check that out. But as we get started, I will go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Carrie Davis. I work at Empower Schools. I've gotten to be there for a little over 2 years now. And Empower has been really lucky to work with a lot of you who are on this call right now in the past couple of years, both supporting 1882 partnership launches and also in our role as a TEA technical assistance provider and a Systems of Great Schools executive advisor. So I am based in Dallas. I know it doesn't matter because we're all virtual right now, but if I haven't met some of you, I hope that I will in the near future. All right. So if you are just coming in, yep, pop your name, organization, role into the chat. But here are some objectives as we're getting started for today, so you know what's ahead, and we'll go to the agenda next. So after this webinar, ideally you'll be able to articulate the value of aligning on non-negotiables early on for both districts and partners. Really excited that you'll get to hear from one district, personally, Fort Worth ISD, about how they went about aligning on their own non-negotiables for partnerships as a district. And then also that you will consider some further refinement to your optional and non-optional service offerings. All right, so our agenda for today. So we will start off with a bit of framing in the contracts and negotiation process. I know this is part 2, so this will be very quick, but want to center us in what we're talking about today. We will talk about the value of aligning on non-negotiables and hear from Fort Worth ISD, as I mentioned. It'll be really great to hear from them and see some actual documents that they've used in their process here. We'll touch on optional and non-optional service selection, and then we will close it up and offer time for some questions. So let's go ahead and get started. And before we really jump in, I want to share a lot of this is very relevant to districts, but if there are any partners on the phone, we are really glad you're here, and there will be opportunities for you to share your perspective, and also the content will relate to some of your needs as well. So stick with us. All right, so let's quickly zoom out and revisit the purpose of a contract. So we know that contracts in H&E2 partnerships are delineated for the reason to clarify the roles and expectations of the partner, responsibilities of the partner and district, and also to promote sustainability of partnerships. We want to make sure that these conditions you're setting for your schools to work best for students are maintained no matter what external factors are happening. And this contract is what grants the partner autonomy and is the legal document that will be upholding the conditions, and of course will go about in your submission to TEA for H&E2 benefits. All right. So as promised, we're going to center ourselves in the contract negotiation timeline. So many of us on this call have already adopted authorizing policies right there at the top, either TEAs or you would have submitted your request to use your own local policy by now. You have thought about your own district needs and your continuous evaluation of your district needs and community demands, and considered campuses that could benefit from a partnership. Many of you have published a call for quality schools, attended relevant and required TEA webinars, and some of you right now are collecting and evaluating your applications, and hopefully are starting to get some contract negotiation meetings on the calendar for early next year, so that you're able to submit all of your materials and your approved contract to TEA by the end of March. So on what we discussed today, we'll be discussing today the aligning on non-negotiables and the partner services, district services for partners. These could happen really as early as the very top of this chart, right? Like, you don't need to wait until this point, but don't fear if you have not done this yet. Now is the perfect time, with many of you having contract negotiations coming up. So I hope that helps to center what we'll be talking about in the overall context of the timeline of contracts. And then I put in on here just a reminder that your contracts must include the service offerings in your pricing. And so you can have that in mind as we're talking. All right, so now that our review framing of our session has been completed, we will get to talk about aligning on non-negotiables as a district for your partnerships. So what does it mean when we talk about aligning on your partner non-negotiables? So for a district, this means considering what operating conditions must be in place for partnerships to be successful in your district. So these non-negotiables should also be aligned to your district priorities and have your own district's capacity in mind. When we talk about non-negotiables for partnerships on the partner side, these are the operating conditions that must be in place for you to successfully implement your model to achieve results. So you've likely been operating your model, you know what you need to be successful, and you'll come to contract negotiations with that in mind. And so ideally, both the district and the partner would enter the call process having already internally aligned on non-negotiables on both ends. All right, so in a pandemic with a million priorities and really pressing ones on your mind, why is it worth spending time aligning on your own district's non-negotiables or as a partner on your non-negotiables? So for districts, this can really help you tailor the content of your call. If you can get as specific as possible to what you're looking for, This will in turn attract the partners who are best suited for your needs and what you're looking for. So this is a great prerequisite to writing your call for quality schools. And this will also enable you to avoid some headaches during negotiations. If you're as clear as possible up front, you can definitely prevent some miscommunication or misunderstanding about what you might be able to offer and what the partner is looking for. And of course, for partners, oftentimes you have lean staffs, you spend time creating really quality applications. Before you do all that work, you should really spend time to align your non-negotiables so that everyone is on the same page and you know what you're open to and what just wouldn't work for you. All right, so before we hear from Fort Worth ISD, and I'm excited to have you hear from them, it is much more helpful to hear what an actual district is doing, but just some food for thought as we get started on what type of non-negotiables districts might consider when you're going about aligning here. So a couple areas to consider, enrollment. So when you think about non-negotiables for enrollment as a district, will you allow your partners to be able to practice selective admissions? Will you allow to have an application that families would fill out to attend a certain school? What would be okay for you? So will you also require partners to take on the existing enrollment practices currently in place for your campus? Is it open choice? Is it neighborhood preference? What will you do about that when you consider a partnership for a particular school? Additionally, what would you be open to in terms of talking about expansion? So would you be open to promising to revisit seats or additional campuses in the future? Or is it really just like you are only interested as a district in one partnership? These would be great things to get clear on in advance of negotiations for both you and the partners who are considering partnering with you. So some non-negotiables for monitoring. If you have a school performance framework, will you require your partners to administer certain assessments that give you data for your SPF? That would be something good to think about. And then are there any larger district priorities that you will translate to goals that you're requiring partners to have? So for example, if it's a district priority of special ed, high school graduation, right? Will you have high school partners also have a goal aligned to your larger district priority? And then in our little other bucket, some other things you might consider are if you will allow operators to have the teachers remain district employees, or will you require operators to employ their own teachers? Will you be open to contributing anything for year zero for a partner? With that, would you be open to fronting the first payment for the partner? So depending on when you currently have that first payment scheduled. And then finally, that we'll get into in a little bit after we hear from Fort Worth, what services are you going to require a partner to opt into? So I hope many of those examples have sparked your thinking here, but I'm most excited to turn it over to David Sines and their team at Fort Worth ISD. As many of you know, Fort Worth is an innovative district. They already have a partnership. I believe we have a member of the partnership team on the phone from Texas Wesleyan's Leadership Academy Network, and they are currently in the middle of their call for great schools. So David, I would love for you and your team to share how you as a district went about aligning on your non-negotiables, if you have any documents to share, and we'll also make sure there's time for some questions about any of the things you're sharing here. So we can plan to take up to 15 to 20 minutes, as much as you have to share. We're listening.
Thank you, Carrie. Can you enable, please, the sharing function?
I
so
will
I can
do
share
that.
The document. Thank you so much.
I will try to do that.
It shouldn't.
There it goes. I got it.
Did it work?
We
Okay.
got it.
Yep, I have it. All right. I'm just going to pop that up there for now. I'll refer to it here in a minute. But just to start with the work of how we got to this point, as you mentioned, we do have the LAN here with us, Leadership Academy Network. here with us. And I would like to say that we started off this way, but we didn't. We, we started off with a very mutual agreement to just sit down and figure this thing out, quite frankly. And so there was several contracting sessions with our attorneys, their attorneys, help from Empower. And along those ways, of course, you know, the whole exercise here is just learning and doing it better and more transparent in a way that this next time around. And so hence we got to this particular call, and we had launched already 2 calls before we got to this level of work with our contract parameters and non-negotiables. And so really what it looked like from a preparation standpoint was sitting down with our team, which is our team internally here, and then of course our executive advisors from Empower. And we broke it down similarly to what you showed on the PowerPoint. And we broke it down into buckets, right? And so basically after breaking that down into buckets, contract length, campus structure, student enrollment, staffing, performance goals, academic program and calendar, and then of course budget, we went to the relevant TEA rules, and then we just kind of had a back and forth interview process about where we would feel comfortable or what things we would want from the contract from the district standpoint. And of course, just keeping in mind that this is our first time attempting to do this, and we are using this for the first time with some hopefully some future partners. It's still very much a work in progress, and there are some things that we may have missed and not covered all. But once again, this exercise for all of us in 1882 is learning and growing together. So with that in mind, you know, contract length, of course, you guys know the rules of up to 10 years. And so basically what we did is we built a matrix. We talk about contract length. For us, we prefer a 5-year contract and renewal based on performance, right? And I won't go through every single box. I'm happy to share this as well, but I'll cover some of the main ones that we know are there. This is one we put in here that's a bit interesting that our leadership team wanted us to do this. And this applies to new partners, usually those out-of-state partners that are coming into our state, some that are not subchapter D anymore already, you know, and this is a non-compete, and it's basically we want to focus on our partnership and build that, and then we can see how it expands in the future. Of course, this doesn't apply if you already have schools within Fort Worth. We love our partners here and our friends, and we've learned a lot from them. But this is mostly for new potential partners that join us and don't have a presence currently in Fort Worth. Student enrollment selection, I know that was covered. One of the pieces we do here is, since this year was the first time we actually launched a call that included our innovative schools. So any schools that are district-wide that have a lottery, and we are very much committed to an equitable lottery, and therefore that's reflected here. Campuses with no criteria for entry will have no change to current enrollment practices. Campuses with criteria for entry, FWSD's preference is to remove all criteria to enter lottery. Notice we use the word preference. That's something that we would definitely want to discuss, but our district is very committed to equity across our campuses. We want any lottery-based campus to mirror our district enrollment. And to that end, we will include that in our performance agreements if it comes to launching a campus with a district-wide enrollment, so that we ensure that the campus mirrors what we have as a district, and we don't inadvertently build a campus that does otherwise, right? Of course, grade levels is on here. I'll take the land, for example. This parameter was actually in the contract for the land. We've added a grade level. Over at Forest Oak Middle School, they were a 7th and 8th school. We had a 6th grade campus that had gone low performing, and we wanted to combine them because they were in close proximity to each other, and we want to combine them physically after this next, hopefully, bond election that we have in the near future. But we all agreed, and we added 6th grade to the Leadership Academy Network, specifically to Forest Oak. And so that was already in play after this first year of partnering with Texas Wesleyan. Special programs, this is a big one that we had a lot of discussion about. Quite frankly, we would prefer that we work with our systems. However, if a partner presents their plan and it meets what we feel is the spirit of what we're trying to do with our special education program, GT and DAP, there's always that room for discussion, but it's something that can be very complex, right? When you get into the federal rules, federal policies around, especially special education, and those and other programs like ESL. Certainly, if a partner comes in with a very compelling plan that far surpasses what we do, certainly we are not going to force anyone into opting into those services, but we start with a level of show us that yours is a stronger program, and that we will serve all students that come to the school. Transfer policies are pretty standard. And please, Carrie, let me know if I'm just going too far into the weeds, or Tracy, if I'm going too far into the weeds, or if
This is great.
Okay, because I can do that pretty easily. Policies, same thing. This is something like the land, with the exercise with the land, we literally sat down and they went through all our policies, and we met actually in May and did this exercise again. And so here are some policies we want to opt out of. One, for example, that for our district partners is your procurement systems, right? The land opted into all our procurement systems, our staffing systems, and with that, of course, comes the procedures that go with it. That can be kind of cumbersome at times. One of the particular ones that we worked to not necessarily opt out, but change the procedure is in procurement. Fort Worth ISD has a requirement of Dr. Scribner and the board approving certain amount of a purchase to a certain amount. That was a local decision. While it does exist in state law, it's not to the same threshold. It's a different threshold than what we put on it. We put a much lower threshold on it. And so, of course, with our partners, we work with them to come up with a different way. In fact, our deputy superintendent put together a letter that Dr. Scribner signed that allows Priscilla Dilly, who's a senior officer for the Leadership Academy Network, to sign in place of the superintendent for those contracts related to the Leadership Academy Network. That took a while to accomplish, but it was one of those things we did not expect, right? Everybody thought, oh, sure, they have autonomy to buy whatever they want, which is true, but it still has to flow through our procurement systems. So our procurement office would be like, oh, what's this? Who is this? Who's Priscilla Dilly? You know, what is Texas Wesleyan buying stuff for? And it took some education, but we're getting to a better place on that end, and that's just kind of another example. Facilities, that's something we'll work together on. Definitely negotiable as we work. You know, as an example, if we take on a partner for one of our middle schools, the next bond, hopefully that if we pass it, would focus on middle schools. So there'll be negotiations there, of course, with a partner that was take on the middle school. Tracy, you have a question? Sorry, you'd come up here.
I was just wondering, this may be may not be quite within all of this, but being a communications person, you know, we tend to get questions at District Charter Alliance when reporters, you know, start finding out about this, or, you know, sort of start asking questions when you're thinking, you know, we're just on the second date, you know, please don't ask us, you know,
right,
sort of where this relationship is going, kind of thing. And so, and I realize they'll continue to keep asking, and that's their job, and I love them and all that. But do you start, you know, have you tried to create processes or thought about processes where you can talk to your partners about, you know, at this point it's going before the board, so therefore it's public, and we gotta sort of have our ducks in a row. I just wondered if that was, you know, part of the discussion, or your crew just handles it there, and, you know, Clint just rolls with
right. No, are you referring to like new partnerships, like anything
new
come up?
partnerships, and just, you know, ones that, you know, potentially you're still in discussions, but you haven't, you know, whether the board started talking about them in public forum or not.
Yes.
You know, I just wondered how you all may handle that, since you've been through a few now.
Yeah, so the first time around, it was a transition from ACE into the LAN. And so we were, you know, kind of beneficiaries of the fact that we wanted to maintain ACE. And this was a way to provide the autonomies and some of the finances to make that happen. So we used that narrative quite a bit when it came to that. And we intend to use that narrative again, except we're going to skip the whole turning it into an ACE and then partnering. So that's one step. But I'll tell you, we are grappling with that because January and February, especially January for us, is when we're going to lift this veil of moving from the application process, the vetting process, into deep into community action. While we feel we have a mandate from the community to get this done, It's never done until we've sat in front of them and we've let everything come out. Right. So in January, that's what it's going to be. We're going to go to the community. We have some surveys prepared. We also intend the final phase of our application. We've taken the partners that came through into several phases. The final phase is going to be a panel of community members. And if things all go well there, and we're trying to paint in a way of not necessarily authorizing it, saying yes or no, or taking a vote, but getting feedback so that we can address it or know what to address if we move forward with a partnership. Now, I can imagine if it comes back, we just get hammered, I'm sure there'll be some second thoughts, right? But we're trying to frame it in a way of, based on the mandate that we have, here's our options, here's why, what concerns or supports or opportunities do you see? Questions, and let's answer them, and let's keep moving forward. And not necessarily doing a yes or no, up, down type vote type thing. And right now, it would only be a couple of partners we're kind of referencing anyway. And so it would depend on the future, how many in the future there is there multiple, is there one, so that would look differently.
David, I have a related question about communications actually in this document. So you have this amazing resource. Thank you so much for sharing it. But how are partners learning about these non-negotiables? Tell us about your process of rolling this out.
So this was not rolled out at the beginning of the call. It wasn't created just yet. And so our intent and our goal is to roll these out at the beginning of every call so people know up front what's going on. For the most part, these are not too surprising per se. But what we did this year is, after we came down to this last phase, what we're calling the matching phase, which we have potential of entering into contracting, we shared them with the partners now. So when we entered them into our bench, because this year our call really created a bench for us for 2 years, and that we've given these to those partners to say, we're welcoming you to the bench. Here's some non-negotiables, and of course they could say, we just can't do that, and that's okay. I mean, that's what they're for. So that we can either talk about them or clarify or whatever it is, and that's how we did it. It was a part of their letter from us to them. That welcome them into our preferred partners in our bench.
Thanks. Final question for me, and then I want to make sure other people can ask questions about this, is who would you recommend if a district is setting out to do this work on aligning on these non-negotiables? Who should be at the table on the district side?
It depends on how deep you're into it, but for sure, your human capital, your HR, someone from there, someone from your budget office, and of course, your innovation team. Those are the two main ones, and your chief academic officer would be good. Now, we've done this several times informally, and in this case, it was just my team and I, and we've worked with our department so closely that we already know those areas that they would be negotiable or non-negotiable. But at the very onset, I would say those major departments: your academics division, budget, and HCM, and operations. From that one, it really was just busing, and which were for us non-negotiable. Busing was a non-negotiable for us. That's something you have to use our services. But that's what I'd recommend out of the gate, I guess, to be helpful.
Thanks. Anyone else have any questions for the Fort Worth team while they're on here about how they did this or the document? All right, well, anything else you want to make sure that you share with the group? And if not, we can keep going. But I mean, this has been so helpful to hear from you and to see this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, and we're open. Send us an email, and we'll be happy to share this document as well.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, I will go back to sharing my screen then. Let's see if we can maneuver this. I think you might have to stop sharing for me to start sharing. Thank you. Okay. All right, so let's Sorry about that. Okay, so our second topic that we will touch on today is talking about optional and non-optional service selections. So getting into this topic, I want to be really clear. The purpose of this time isn't to tell you how to price out your services or give you great academic model or mathematical models for pricing it out. The purpose of this time in our mini webinar today is to really give you some ideas of how you might be able to either start the process of considering your service offerings or really refining what you're able to offer for partners. All right, so once again, why spend now? Spend time now selecting, further refining your district service offerings. So one reason is to avoid unexpected costs for partners. So if you haven't really thought about or haven't been able to get clear on how much something will cost, a partner might not be able to budget for it. And so we really want to make sure everyone is on the same page as much as possible going into these negotiations. This will allow you and your team to go into the contract negotiation process prepared. It takes a while to get clear on how much it costs to price out things. And so if you want to make it as accurate as possible, definitely worth it to start earlier and to think about any refinements you'd like to make. And then additionally, this could help you start planning as a district for next year if you will have any new levels of demand for different district services. So if you might anticipate an increase in demand, you might need to staff up, or if you anticipate a decrease in demand, you might need to reallocate district departments accordingly. So something to think about there. And then thinking too, I wanted to make sure, put a plug in, we were talking about aligning on partner policies. So those will come in very handy. I know you're all expecting the model policies from DCA. So these will come in handy on the partner side during this negotiation process. All right, so as you can imagine, just being intentional about your offerings and your expectations as a district really enables partners to create the conditions that they need for your kids to succeed, both of your kids, right? It's a partnership. And then also making sure it's sustainable for your district. You want to agree to something too that isn't going to put a huge hole in your budget, and you want to make sure that you're both coming in clear-eyed. So beginning the work, if you are not currently in a call for great school, call for quality schools, and you're thinking about services, really just another reminder to invest as much time as possible up front, working with your budgeting team on even just getting clear on how much it currently costs to provide the services that you'll be offering. Even if you're not planning on creating the most detailed service pricing list, it will take a while to figure out how much it costs to offer services. So just a plug to start thinking about that and start scheduling those meetings, even if you're not right now about to enter into a call. And if you are entering in a call and you haven't done this yet, then now is a great time to schedule those meetings. And so I know we have some districts on the phone here who've done this work before. I would love to hear from y'all if anyone is able to share when you would recommend starting this work. So I know we have Dr. Kale on the line, and if you are able to share, or anyone else from the district perspective, when would you recommend the districts start thinking about their service pricing?
Yesterday would be my answer to that question. It is quite tedious. It is a foreign way of thinking for departments. We're really starting to price out some other things within our curricular area, which we had not done before. And our directors are like, what are you asking me for? So I would say the sooner the better, because it is definitely, especially those of us with education degrees and not business degrees, it's a foreign concept.
Thanks so much for sharing. Okay, so if you are a district like Midland, for example, who has already priced out some services, you have a menu of services, but you're thinking about how do you get even more specific about your offerings? a few ideas for you here. So let's take the idea of professional development generally as an offering. So here's some ways you could consider further refining it. So you could consider the type of support. Do you want to offer math PD separately than your social studies PD? Do you want to offer it by grade level? Do you want to do elementary PD, middle school PD, and then even recipient? So do you want to lump in your PD offerings of just teacher PD, or would you be able to separate it from principal PD, because partners might be interested in one and not the other? You could think about the level of support. So if someone is opting into PD, are they opting into all of your monthly trainings, or are they perhaps paying a higher level of service and getting on-demand support? So they could call someone in your office for, maybe scheduling a training that's just for their campus. And then finally, you might want to consider new services. So are there any other services that maybe your district has specific capacity and expertise that you might want to provide to partners? I'm thinking of one thing, if you have done your teacher incentive allotment work and your partner might be interested in doing that, you could consider putting that as a service offering. So there are really endless possibilities depending on how creative and how skilled you and your budgeting team are. But as Dr. Kale said, the earlier the better, and the more granular you can get, really the better for partners. And so ideally, you'll have a really well-developed menu of services going into your negotiations. But that's not to say that there aren't new services or levels of service that will come out after the negotiations or during the negotiations take place, because there really might be unique partner needs that you're not aware of. So, one example could be if you have a partner who is doing early college or dual credit and they need a specific bus route to get students to a local college. That might be a different level of transportation service than is currently offered. And so once again, I am interested in opening it up here before we really wrap it up and hearing from districts or partners. And so, generally, are there any lessons that you've learned in developing your service offerings and menus for your partnerships? And then also maybe for the partners on the line, are there any unique services that you think your model might require that would be helpful to share? So I will open it up for anyone who would like to share and appreciate in advance anyone's bravery. And it could even be, if you are a district, if you have had a partner who has requested a unique service that you didn't previously have.
Well, since I don't like silence, I'll throw in some things here. I think it's been really interesting to see, and part of the various negotiations I've been a part of is it seems like especially partners who haven't worked in Texas before don't always necessarily have the best understanding of how our school finance system works. And our school finance system is complicated, Byzantine, arcane, throw whatever else you want to throw into it, even if it's just been recently modified. It's still really confusing, and trying to be as clear as possible on what is realistic and what is not realistic at the beginning of the process can save everyone a lot of heartburn.
Thanks, Beth. Anyone else have any nuggets to share with the group?
I'm glad you brought up TIA. We're in the midst of doing that, but we're kind of ours is a bit different because actually the LANA is already in cohort C and we're in cohort D. So they won't be opting into ours, but our future partners may.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Carrie, something unique that we're looking into right now is not necessarily a partner buying one of our services, but us buying one of their services.
Well, that's intriguing. Tell us more. Or are you able to share anything more?
Can't share anything else right now, but it's thrown them for a loop too. So that made me feel better.
Great. All right. Well, that is really the end of the content that I have for you today. I want to make sure we have time for any questions or any final advice that anyone on the phone on the call would like to share. But I just want to thank again the Fort Worth ISD team, Dr. Kale too. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And everyone for spending their time with us today with all of the other things going on right now in the world and in education.
And I would also like to thank Carrie for volunteering to do this. I know this was an extra thing to add on our plate during the holiday season, so I really appreciate it. But just to want to remind everybody, if you missed this, if there's something you want to come back to, this will be available on our website for I hope forever as we elaborate. And if there's other topics in negotiation contracts that you have a lot of interest in and want to hear from others, please let us know. And we're definitely working on part 3 and want to make sure it's catered to what y'all are interested in hearing about.
Thank y'all for having us.
Thank you. And if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks again for everybody who volunteered.